welcome to the semi-final of MDHO 2019. My name is Ryan and I will be your chair for this round. Battling with me, we have Sharifah, TJ, Terrence, and Fred. So without further ado, I would like to invite Prime Minister to start the debate.
When US announced that they backed the interim president as and opposed Maduro, Mike Pence also said that they will leave all options open and everything's on the table. They're considering possible intervention into Venezuela. We think this is extremely harmful and an extremely unstrategic move for US to make, and we absolutely regret it on the side of government. The first thing I'll do is to prove to you why them backing up the interim president, opposing Maduro leads to possible intervention, which is extremely harmful, leads to extremely bad consequences. Second argument, why our alternative on having borders and allowing individuals to pursue better lives is far more preferable, why they harm any possible alternatives for individuals in Venezuela. The first argument on why this is a possible conflict and intervention. Recognize when US openly says that they back up interim president, they are also spiking up tensions with countries that oppose them. Recognize that countries like US, Russia and China, Turkey, for example, actively support Maduro and actively want him to be in positions of power. The point at which they oppose Maduro and openly say that they want Juan Guaido as the president. I think this is when they spike up a lot of conflict that leads to possible intervention and US intervening into Venezuela. Why is this harmful? I think firstly, that this leads to so much more conflict on their world. So recognize, if they want any benefits on their world, if they want to possibly take down Maduro, US has to intervene because that's the only way that they get their benefits. Why is this conflict harmful? Firstly, I think that you lead to so much more collateral damage in terms of how much the economy, which is already so bad, is harmed even more. Recognize that Venezuela's only form of sustenance is their oil. The point at which there's a conflict means that US is going to try to sabotage their oil rigs, things like this which harms the economy far more. More importantly, there's going to be so much of damage in terms of the people, how much deaths that they cause, like civilians that actually suffer so much more, civilians who already suffer so much more. The point at which there's a US intervention, because recognize that Russia and China will fight back and also come in to intervene because they support Maduro, US doesn't. Before that, yeah.
Recognizing that the US supporting Guaido gave him the power that he needed to rally the people and go against Maduro, who is actively suppressing their lives. Why is that a bad thing?
I think that you don't recognize how much power Maduro has, that he has the military behind him. He's so authoritarian, nothing is working in status quo. If it's true that people are so radical and so powerful and can challenge Maduro, they would have done it by now. You need to recognize how powerful Maduro is. There is no way of you bringing him down unless there's a possible US intervention, which will tell you creates so much conflict and harms the economy even more. People don't deserve to die. Even on a scale, I think that and constant damage to the economy is far worse compared to them like living a bad life, which I'll prove to you why they make it worse. Second level, why US is likely to fail. So the first thing I'll say is that US allies are people like EU, Canada, Mexico, Colombia, Brazil, and possibly the US. Firstly, is that the EU, which is its biggest ally, is already facing Brexit. It's in so much of trouble. I don't think that they will even want to fund money into the possible intervention of US into the countries. Recognize also that Europe is facing so much of right-wing populism, means that people are less likely to support initiatives of intervention in status quo. Also, I think that because US is alone and has less power and less leverage compared to people like China and Russia, which will go all out to make sure that they fight the war till the end. Recognize also that they have huge amounts of incentives to fight the war all out because they get oil from Maduro, because Russia Russia supports authoritarian governments, also because Turkey's gold trade with Venezuela is extremely important. They have huge amounts of incentive to get support from other enemies of the US, things like Pakistan, other countries, to fight the war till the end. US is alone. I think they're very likely that they will fail. Sure.
This debate is not about US actively going out sending a military intervention. It's just branding Guaido as an interim president. How would that lead to a suddenly huge proxy war that will affect every country?
Okay, so the first thing I would say is that them openly saying this and also left them considering the option of intervention, because they can't just support the president. They wouldn't do that. The only way to get tangible outcomes is to intervene, given how successful given how powerful Maduro is. That's why you get possible intervention on your side. But even if yours is just saying that they support Maduro, I don't see any tangible benefits that you will even accrue on your world. The last thing, I think that Maduro wants this intervention. You intervening and you even wanting to fight the war only plays into his rhetoric. Recognize that Maduro wants US to lose this war, and it's extremely important because Russia and China has already said that they will come in and they will intervene if the US decides to touch Venezuela. The point at which Maduro knows that yes, Russia and China's huge amounts of support, he wants US to fail because that will lead to them not intervening again, and he will flex his power even more. Having that support from US and China means that they will continuously support an authoritarian government even after US fails. Recognize also that US is, once they fail, they're likely to not have any other forms of alternatives on their world, because Russia and China will continuously fight the war and dominate and make Maduro even more powerful than he already is. The second argument, why the alternative is far better. What's the alternative that happened before they announced that they support the interim president? There was borders that were open that allowed these individuals to go to Colombia to seek better lives. So, for example, a lot of Venezuelans flee to Colombia, where they had small villages where Colombia accepted them. They at least got jobs there. They could integrate to some level. It's still an alternative. What happened once US announced that they will possibly intervene, that they backed Juan Guaido and that they actively opposed Maduro, was that they shut up all the borders. Like there was so much more military control over the border. They shut them all up. They locked people in and made sure that people can't escape, because they want to show that there's people and they want US to intervene, because that was Maduro's whole game. Allowing Maduro to shut and incentivizing Maduro to shut down his borders and not allowing people to escape, left people not being able to pursue better lives, which at least happens on our world. At least that's an alternative. On their world, they perpetuate conflict and possible intervention, which the US will lose anyways, and Russia and China will continue to dominate. Maduro becomes far more powerful, but B, shut up any other alternatives for the most vulnerable of individuals. Never be part of this.
Here.
Thank you for the speech. Now let's invite the opposition. Here.
One thing side government failed to recognize in today's debate is the condition that Venezuela is in, right? We tell you these individuals are suffering on a day-to-day basis where they can't even buy bread. They have failed to tell you why keeping Maduro in power is essentially better for the citizens on the ground. We tell you it's extremely harmful towards the people, because keeping Maduro in power is essentially going to drive the country down the drain. And we tell you the only way to help these individuals is by giving them the US support, because there's no other option. This is the only option left. Leaving Maduro in power is the worst possible outcome to do, right? But before that, how are we laying out my speech today? Firstly, I'll be explaining to you on how the world of opposition look like, and I'll be explaining one argument which how US-backed support will pressure Maduro to leave power, and before that, I have a few rebuttals, right? Firstly, they talked about intervention, and let me tell you why we're going to bite the bullet, and we're going to tell you why intervention is okay in the worst case scenario for the sake of engaging. Why is intervention okay? We tell you the condition of countries is so bad right now. I do not have food on the table, and my president does not allow me to get that aid, meaning people are constantly suffering. So we tell you intervention is the only way to help these people out of the circle, to help these people out of this pit. They tell you the side government failed to recognize this, right? Because intervention, at the very least, we tell you, yeah, there might be there might be downsides to it, right? Maybe you have harms, certain harms. But we tell you the outcome is a higher chance for these people to escape poverty, for the country to slowly burn out and climb out of that pit. But side government fails to do that. Sit down here. The side government fails to do that because they're keeping Maduro in power. And when Maduro is in power, we tell you change is not likely to happen because he's happy with how it is. And we tell you the country is going to fall down the drain. So we tell you intervention is a better scenario compared to their world when Maduro is staying in power. Secondly, right, Maduro is being powerful. Exactly. We tell you Maduro is extremely powerful. But with the intervention of US, we tell you we weaken his power. How? Firstly, we slowly weaken him, right? Because when US supports such a global arbiter, supports another leader, we tell you it casts doubts inside the military. Is it really worth it to support Maduro? Am I going to survive this time of crisis, right? We tell you it casts doubt and it slowly weakens Maduro. Compared to your side, we tell you Maduro is going to stay into power and he's going to cling to that possibility. We allow to cast doubt into military and legitimizes his support towards people on the ground. For that, sure.
It's factually incorrect to point out that the military is going to continue questioning themselves in their support towards Maduro, noting that US backed and voiced their support a long time ago, and they actively supported Maduro back in by blocking our borders, by blocking our aid, by detrimenting people on the ground.
Yeah, we have an argument. The argument will be settled by the second speaker. Will be talking about how military will be settled in this case, right? But what will I be doing in my speech? Firstly, how would the world look like in the world of opposition? We thought we would recognize Juan Guaido as the president, we provide aid and those type of things, right? But firstly, my first argument, how US-backed support will pressure Maduro to leave power. This argument has three folds. Firstly, US-backed power is able to proliferate the pressure Maduro faces. Secondly, we tell you US-backed support is able to increase involvement of other countries. And lastly, I'm going to tell you on how support of the US legitimizes Juan's position as an interim leader. Firstly, US-backed power is able to proliferate the pressure to Maduro to leave. What happens in the world of government? Without intervention or without the US support power, we tell you Maduro will keep staying in power, meaning he can oust Juan easily. He said that I have all the power, I have all the support, I have control over you. When US intervenes, we tell you we take this narrative away and we weaken Maduro at the end of the day. Even in the best case scenario, right, where Juan is still staying in power in their case, we tell you we make him go out of the power quicker, right? Because we tell you this issue is a very time-sensitive issue. Maybe in their best case scenario, Maduro will step down at the long run, right? But we tell you the long run, we cannot afford the long run anymore. People are suffering for far too long, and this is what they fail to recognize. The side of opposition is a side which prioritizes people and recognize that people can't put food on the table anymore. We want to put food on the table for these people because we recognize the amount of sufferings that they face. Sit down. Secondly, right, US-backed support is able to increase involvement of other countries. How? Firstly, we have to recognize that US is a global arbiter, right? So whatever moves they do or whatever policies they implement will affect the whole globe, right? So when they do this, when US supports Venezuela, we tell you it's incentivized other countries to support Venezuela as well and Juan as a leader. Why? Because when other countries visualize that US is actually helping Venezuela, it becomes an issue, right? People will start discussing about these issues. Other countries will take into account of what's happening inside Venezuela in the first place. So what happens here? So when you discuss issues regarding this thing, you have more awareness. So people are more aware of these issues and they're more likely to want to help, to send aid or to fund certain groups to help these individuals on the ground. We tell you we can only achieve this, sit down. We can only achieve this by having US support, because we're able to garner traction towards these people. But in their world, right, we tell it's much more difficult because when the global arbiter is not supporting, why am I going to risk myself or my country to aid this Venezuela? Because I do not want to risk myself. But it's more likely than not for them to support Venezuela when US is the global arbiter and is supporting and openly supporting Venezuela. So we tell you it's more likely for countries to join in to support and to pack together when US is a global arbiter and is going against Venezuela. Secondly, moving on, the last issue, support of US legitimizes one's position as an interim leader. How does this happen, right? In status quo, people already support Juan as a leader, right? But with the US-backed support, we tell you it's more likely than not to legitimize even more the position of Juan. How, right? With US support, it becomes more legitimate because now citizens on the ground see and visualize that a huge global superpower is there to back me, is there to support me, so it's more likely to increase their courage on the ground, to stand up against Juan, to finally say that it's okay. It's more likely for me to be safer for me to speak out or for me to go against Juan because I have a US-backed superpower against in the side world of opposition. Compared to their world, when there's no support structures or there's no one to help, it's less likely for them to come out or to riot against the president because they're afraid. They don't have that support structure or that cushion that they can blow to. But in the world of opposition, we provide you that. We tell you that US-backed power is there to support you, and we're willing to do anything to make you escape through this thing, right? So what are the outcomes? Let's take a world on how this side of government looks like, right? Firstly, we tell you Maduro is less likely to leave power in their world because he has a lot more room to maneuver. But when you inside opposition, we limit the room to maneuver, right? But even in the best case scenario, when he does sit down, we step down, tell you it's much longer time, and we cannot afford that time. Side opposition makes it much easier and much faster for him to step down. The world of opposition is the world that recognizes that the condition on the ground in Venezuela is extremely harmful. We cannot take chances anymore. We need Maduro out.
Thank you, Leader of Opposition. Now I would like to invite Deputy Prime Minister. Okay, yes.
All the arguments coming out from the side of opposition is conditioned upon one issue, that US can succeed, that US has pressure, and US can influence other foreign nations to back them up. So long as we prove that this issue will not exist on side of opposition, we take this debate. Also note that all the nuances we had in PM on how there's Russia and China backing Maduro up, and that's why already in of itself, there's less pressure being brought forth by the US, is completely unresponded to by the entire speech coming from Elo. I'll do three things in speech. The first, levels of responses against opposition. The second, talk about why you actually worsen the condition on the ground for Venezuelans who are the most innocent and who are the most vulnerable. And finally, even your best case scenario, where you succeed in toppling Maduro over, why is it that your intervention is still going to be bad? Two things on responses. The first, we have to contest the idea that US has traction. There are three levels that brought to this. The first, US has traction of backing Maduro because they can influence other foreign nations because they're the global arbiter. The first thing I'll tell you, the US is led by Trump. When Mike Pence went to a conference recently and said, I'm here to represent the great president of the United States, Donald Trump, nobody clapped, some people snickered. I don't think that's the form of foreign traction and foreign arbitrage you have. We don't see people supporting the US right now. I don't know how the US is regarding support. But even on an individual level, Europe and UK currently are unable to help you with the rise of right-wing populists that don't want immigrants in the country as a whole. They don't want to expend their resources and economy upon fighting for causes of other nations which don't directly benefit them. We don't see how these powerful, so-called powerful foreign nations would actually come to your aid. And finally, the UNSC, your one cop-out. Even in this circumstance, Russia and China will veto against the help you're going to give to the Venezuelans on the ground. I don't see how you get any foreign traction. I don't see what foreign body you have to help your case in supporting Guaido. Your case falls on those premises. And the last nuance they had was that because US backed Guaido, then Maduro will feel pressured. Come on guys, Maduro's incentive to also shut out all opposition he has already in his status quo. Even if it's on a scale, it's not a scale that's really big. And Maduro is already going to oppress Guaido if he comes out and says, I'm gonna run for presidency, I want to take you down. What's been seen, right? When the case of Venezuela has been perpetuated in the past decade, already there were people protesting. Maduro let off harmful gas against individuals. He actively cracked down on protesters. Those things already happened. Absence of backing of US. We think this debate is more comparative. In which world you bring more harm? We think that's the world which we win this debate upon. So, onto the first argumentation in this debate, how you principally assault individuals on the ground. We need to note that the most important stakeholder in this debate, as a group of opposition, are the Venezuelans who suffer daily. Venezuelans who have to run through garbage to find food to feed their families in these circumstances. We think it's already bad. But in comparative, and the reason why we take this debate is because you make it substantially worse. Why is it so? We'll tell you that individuals on the ground actually have some alternatives in status quo. They can leave Venezuela, they enter Colombia, and this is proven to be effective with the people who live on the village borders of Colombia, accepting them in, putting them in their houses, has been clearly amplified by the Vox documentary recently. The problem with our opposition at this point in time is that they worsen the circumstance because they create pressure which leads to nothing. Why is this so? Because if you risk the threat of military intervention, Maduro has an incentive to keep its citizens within his nation to use as human shields to try to deter the US as much as possible. This is the reason why Maduro locked down his borders, because he knows Maduro will likely not intervene if the US is to risk civilian lives in their world. And what becomes of this principle, right? They're the principle how you should back Maduro. We think if your principle is you're unwilling to intervene and there are reasons to why you won't do so, then you don't need to back them up at all. Why? Because you actually create pressure which leads to no other alternative. You create pressure that leads to greater crackdown of individuals on the ground which don't lead to any benefit. We think that principle in of itself is unjustified. And note, there was a principal inconsistency coming out of the side of LO when Kun POI that in our world, if you're only going to support the backing as recognizing him as interim president, then where would you get your hands on the proxy war? But then Harry came and said, well, we'll support entire military intervention in these circumstances. So we really don't know which case you want, a soft or a hardcore. This is a problematic stance on the other side of the house. Final argumentation in this way, and notably one of the most important ones. Even in your best case scenario, where we assume the US won the military, send their troops to Venezuela, take some Maduro and gives how to drain Guaido, this is not a benefit towards Venezuela as a whole, or the Venezuelans. We'll tell you what, it perpetually makes conflict worse and creates more instability in the long run. We have been seeing this. The trend with the US when it comes to foreign intervention is as simple as the invasion of Iraq and Syria, which led to the formation of ISIS, the invasion of Afghanistan, which led to the rise of multiple terrorist groups, and the invasion of Colombia, which led to guerrilla groups coming to power that ravaged the area for decades. The trend here, and the nuance you did note, is that the trend of US on all these circumstances is that US has zero care or zero obligation for post-war reconstruction. They have a nation that every single time they interfere in foreign policy, whenever they win a war, they leave right after because they want to preserve their troops and preserve their economy, and they don't care about the future of the country because they feel as though any money they invest in them will not be money that will trickle back down towards their nation. The problem with this circumstance, and the reason why it's problem is simple. The first reason, right, we say that Trump is an individual who has been very affirmative towards the stance of pulling out troops in general. He's literally pulling out troops of Iraq, even though he thinks that there's no longer an ISIS threat, even though it's still there, as brought forth by his foreign minister. Trump threatened to pull troops out of Afghanistan multiple times. This is the trend when it comes to these individuals, and this will continue to follow at a point which choose to invade Venezuela in your best case scenario. But the reason why it's problematic is simple. Because the reconstruction of a country requires Juan Guaido to have some form of political structural support. The reason as to why is because you will leave the entire country in shambles through a war. You will destroy their oil fields, you will destroy their forms of economy, and you will make it substantially harder for Juan Guaido to have any proper nuance that can be associated as to why he's a good president. And the point you intervene and you don't help an individual build back the country, we think it's problematic because you take away more legitimacy from Juan Guaido. What people portray Juan Guaido as in those circumstances is an individual who brought it worse. With me in our world, it's already bad. But in comparative is, if China and Russia are already investing in Venezuela, at the very least, there's still more net GDP, which leads to overall more net money, which could trickle down towards individuals on the ground. And the situation can be solved internally through a long-term process. Your world is the one which you choose to intervene just because you want to show your might, you want to show you're a foreign arbiter. These reasons are why your intervention leads to harmful outcomes. We've proven to you in the most likely scenario in which you don't succeed, you actually make it worse. When you strengthen up Russia and China's support for Maduro, you make it substantially harder for people on the ground to attain lives when they're blocked out of escaping their nation to find a better life in Colombia, for example. And even if you assume you get your case of you intervening and you getting to get rid of Maduro and put Juan Guaido in power, you have no incentive to help Juan Guaido keep himself in a structural system which people can believe in. The problem with that then is that you perpetuate instability that currently exists in Venezuela. You make it harder for Venezuelans to live a life without digging through garbage to find food for their everyday survival. We think this is the worst world. If you side with the side that sides for a peaceful Venezuela and a more stable economy, you side for government.
Okay, for the speech now, let's invite the leader of opposition. Yes, sir.
It is abhorrent for a side of government to put hundreds and thousands of lives of Venezuelan citizens as bargaining chips because they do not care about their lives. They want to prevent foreign intervention in order to prevent future conflicts in the future. We think it's unfair for them to use foreign intervention or foreign intervention in the future as a metric to not help citizens at the end of the day. We will argue to you on the side of opposition why foreign intervention, for the sake of engagement, we will also take the case of foreign intervention, even if you're willing to intervene and also have multilateral intervention and convince other countries to invade as well, we will say why that is a better benefit to provide for better lives for Venezuelan citizens. Notice that our burden in today's debate is to prove how we imposition lives or situations better, and we'll tell you why the situations on the ground for citizens will be better in our work, and we're able to prove that situations are better. We take this debate. In my speech, I'm going to answer one question, which is how the US backing will absorb the fixation of international attention and create situations better for citizens. But before I talk about this, a few points of rebuttal to government. Firstly, will a proxy war happen? The first thing we would say to that is that we don't think proxy war is likely to happen, because the first thing that we say is that US branding Guaido as an interim president does not lead to US actively posing a threat towards other countries. So we don't see the incentive of Russia and China being directly at threat at the point at which US backs the interim president. So we don't see that direct incentive for you to invade and have a proxy war. Having seen, but assuming it is true and they are somehow threatened by the fact that US is backing the president and somehow it will lead to a foreign intervention, somehow they are threatened, I'll say why foreign intervention, I'll say why a proxy war is still unlikely to happen. Number one, a proxy war is only likely to happen, and that is contingent upon the military supporting the government. We'll refute that claim. We'll tell you why the military and Venezuelan government is not supporting Maduro. That means a proxy war is unlikely to happen because Russia cannot simply give aid towards the military that hates Maduro in the first place. That's the first claim that I refute. Secondly, is that we think a lot of times countries like Russia and United States will not engage in a proxy war or conflict because they're afraid of the size of American forces. What does this actually mean? So there's a reason why North Korea did not invade South Korea or did not attack for the longest time, because they're afraid of the size of American forces within North Korea. So we think even if you say that there's proxy war, somehow everyone will be like, whole Cold War again, we think it's unlikely for them to engage in war because now US can send their troops and other countries would fear the size of American forces, therefore not engage in a war to begin with. We think those protections can be given as well. Because if you want to analyze whether or not this outcome is true, it's contingent upon how US forces pose a threat towards other nations, and we've seen evidently that it's posed a threat to countries, big superpowers like North Korea that has an established military and huge nuclear weapons, were also afraid to invade in South Korea. Have a seat. Secondly, is fleeing to Colombia the most proper solution? I think this is horrible. They just want to end up the Venezuelan citizens to become no different from immigrants that lose a sense of identity, lose a sense of belonging, lose their home. That is no point of living, Mr. Speaker. We will put to you that a life in which you cannot be at home, you don't have aid to begin with, when you're living into unfair situations in another person's country, where you lose your identity, is the worst of life you can get. In our world, maybe it's hard and situations are horrible, but at least we're taking measures to make sure that aid will be given. At least we're taking measures to oust that president and to make sure to establish a proper governance afterwards. At least they have, for generations after, they'll still have a proper identity, they'll still have a home. We think those things have to also be a consideration. Because in your world, if everyone flees off to Colombia, then they're like just GG.com, no Venezuela anymore. Thirdly, is US likely to fail? I think it's clear from that side of government, they say US fails in many certain circumstances, in vast majority of instances. But here's where the unique strategy comes to play. We argue to you that US will not immediately lead to a foreign intervention and send your military, but rather just brand the president as an interim president, and we'll tell you about why those outcomes will materialize better in that world first. Having seen, so we also don't think that US is unlikely to fund for post-war reconstruction, because we think US also cares in money, also has considerations about profits, which means that economic investment with Venezuela will be an incentive for you to also support post-war reconstruction. They have to acknowledge that economic investment in getting oil from Venezuela is also especially important. My argument, how will backing the US absorb better international attention? Here's where we have to note that the support of the people is crucial in fighting for this cause.
in our world, it's true. I mean, status quo is true that most people are already supporting Guaido. I mean, Venezuelan citizens are already supporting Guaido. But what happens then? We think it's important to note that the military is involved in this particular circumstance. And we think oftentimes in the current scenario is that the military within Venezuelan government are on the fence. They do not support Maduro's administration, but at the same time they fear because he's still in control. This is proven because 25 soldiers actually tried to raid earlier this year in January in order to combat that governance. So given the fact that most the soldiers in Venezuela are on the fence, it is important to note that US backing this president will give moral legitimacy to Guaido and incentivize his military, give an incentive for his military to actually oust this government, to support and assimilate with these people and overthrow that government. This is especially important to note because we think it is important to note that the military right now is on the fence, and we think it's easily swayed when you give moral legitimacy to Guaido. And we think secondly and much more importantly is that we have to analyze the train of thought of Venezuelan citizens. Because right now, they probably think that they are the dire necessity to get food, to get medicine for example, to get probably jobs because they're all dying, it's hyperinflation, it's extreme poverty, they do not have jobs. Notice that their goal is just to get economic goals or economic gains because of their desperation. But when US actually backs up Guaido as an interim president, that's when it highlights this problem as a political problem. So the strategy of citizens now would not be, I want to get economic gains and focus on economics. They would rather see this political crisis as the reason for the economic crisis, which means the strategy will be more towards ousting the government and not getting it through concerts or whatsoever. So we think it's especially important that a shift in strategies will only occur when US truly supports Guaido as a president. The conclusion of my speech is simple. We think there is always possibility of war to happen, but we think it means that it creates better situations for Venezuelan government, not lose a sense of identity. That is the world in which the Venezuelan citizens would actually have the true meaning of life.
With your law now, I would like to invite government with here.
Panel, I think the lives of Venezuelans on the ground today is extremely dire. Their conditions are terrible. We accept the premise that they're dying and that they don't get food on the table. But this narrative, this emotional impulse that they are giving us coming from side opposition is one that has plunged countries like Iraq into chaos. It's one that plunged Colombia into chaos. We think no matter how regrettable the current condition of Venezuelans are on the ground, that is not an excuse to commit to something as large as a military intervention, which will cause desperation and even more suffering for people on the ground. The reason why they cannot take such an extremely soft stance and just say, we're just going to label Guaido as someone that we want as legitimate is because they don't get any material benefits. Why did we tell you this? Firstly, we told you how allies, no matter even if they say we also support, like even if the EU also says we support Guaido, that doesn't actually do anything because they don't also want to commit to aid and those kinds of things because they have their own local issues. But secondly, even if they do send aid, look what happened. Maduro just puts lorries on the border and blocks off all aid. That means that even though there's aid being sent, people on the ground are unable to access it because Maduro as an authoritarian leader can just block off his borders and make sure that people are unable to access that aid. We say that's extremely harmful, right? But thirdly, we say you may be able to legitimize Guaido to a certain extent, but to what extent do you actually get that? Because recognize they didn't deal with a nuance of how, like literally China and Russia, two of the world's superpowers, are currently expressing so much support for Maduro. We don't think that's a benefit that they get on their side. Well, I'm going to ask one question in this debate today, right? Which is, which side better ensures the well-being of Venezuelans on the ground? Because if we can prove to you why the Venezuelans' lives get so much worse at a point at which US tries to intervene in their own local affairs, we say we take this debate. Firstly, they tell us that the intervention is okay because the conditions are bad. I already told you about why an impulse decision is illegitimate. They told us that you are able to cast doubt in the minds of military and get rebellion. We tell you this is extremely false, right? Like the pressure that has been on Maduro has been happening for so long. You don't only need US to say that we don't support Maduro. The people suffering on the ground, if we buy their premise that these people are actually nice people who will change their hearts, we don't think that's true because even through the suffering that we've seen of civilians on the ground, the military continues to support Maduro. Why is this? They're able to benefit directly of Maduro's success because they are able to enjoy rates and enjoy certain perks, buy certain food that are inaccessible to people like Venezuelan citizens who currently have to use black market rates that are extremely inflated. At the point at which they want to turn to the other side, that means Maduro can directly target them. It means that they don't enjoy this and they live as another one of Venezuelan in terrible conditions, right? They say that they want to legitimize Guaido. We already told you about how this legitimacy won't be to an extent in which you actually get political change. Because recognize that even if US as a country supports Guaido, there are still many external influences in this entire ecosystem of what will be able to make that change. That is, China can continue to say Maduro is legitimate, Russia can continue to say that Maduro is legitimate. We find that Kuhan said something extremely false. They said US backing Guaido doesn't threaten any countries, so even if they engage in a war, like Russia and China has no incentive to come in, right? That's just false. Why exactly is this? Because recognize that there are many reasons why Russia would want influence over Venezuela. Firstly, the issue of oil, right? Like oil is such a big thing that they trade, and it's one thing in which Putin heavily relies on Venezuela as one of the largest oil exporters in the world. Secondly, they share many political leanings together, right? The fact that Venezuela, Maduro recognized the annexation of Crimea. That's one of the things that we think makes their alliance so strong. The third thing is that Putin has he has a reputation for wanting to support authoritarian leaders, right? That's the same as we see for China, which is why they express their support for Maduro. Right? Like even countries like Turkey, right? They're reliant on Venezuela for the exchange and trade of gold, which is so vital to their GDP. We think those things mean that at the point at which Russia wants to threaten the very leader that is bringing so much benefits to Putin, bringing so much benefits to Xi Jinping, that's the point at which they recognize that if US decide to engage in a war in Venezuela, they will also want a stake in that. Yeah.
You have to deal with the comparative that people or countries would be afraid of the size of American troops and soldiers in those countries.
Look, right, I don't see how exactly you get it. Because, okay, you also have like Russians, and you also have Chinese, who are also just as intimidating, if not more. I don't actually see why exactly the US is so scary when you also have those stakeholders hanging to that. What did we tell you, right? And just notice the complete lack of response to this, right? We say, let's analyze Maduro's mindset as a leader, right? We say that you play into Maduro's establishment of power. Why exactly is this? We said that at the point at which US wanted to back Guaido, and that's when he sent foreign aid, Maduro wants to continue to exercise his power. What did that look like? That looked like blocking off borders, saying, I am the leader, if you touch my country, I will use my citizens as battering rams, and I'll continue to make the conditions far worse. That threatens US, that whatever US does, if you continue to threaten my rule, I'm going to make these people's life even worse. They hold their citizens hostage. We think that's harmful. But the second thing is that you perpetuate the narrative of imperialism, right? That is to say, we gave you examples of how the West has continually failed in interventions in the future. The nuance is that maybe there's a possibility that Maduro wants US intervention. Why exactly is that? Because then you get to fire up the narrative within your country that the West is bad, that the West wants to intervene in our local matters. And that's how you garner even greater support. And that's how you garner even greater support from China and Russia and even certain citizens in your country. But the second thing we told you is that let's take them at their best, right? Let's say Trump manages to come into Venezuela, manages to get Guaido into power. We gave you a nuanced analysis of why Trump as an isolationist power wants to pull out, right? The fact that he's currently retracting the country from places like Afghanistan, places like Syria, shows that he's kind of short-sighted in a sense that he doesn't want to waste US resources in a foreign land like Venezuela. And at that point, you do what exactly happened in Colombia a few years ago by the by the US government, in which they left the area ravaged by Colombian guerrilla groups who've ravaged the area for decades, right? Their worst case scenario that they have to deal on this side is a full-blown outscale war that has happened in proxy wars around the world like Syria. We don't think they've engaged with that. They tried to tell us that US wants to say we rebuild the country. We told you that Trump is not the type of leader to stay because he doesn't want to waste his resources. But secondly, if Venezuela's economy is so terrible at the point at which they intervene, there's not much incentive for US to be able to benefit from that. For all those reasons, we think we're side that even if we are unable to make Venezuelans' lives so much better, they make theirs so much worse.
Thank you, Government Whip. Now I would like to invite Opposition Whip. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, you have to recognize that people in Venezuela are leading absolutely terrible lives. These are people who are living in poverty. These are people who do not see any other alternative but to run away from their country, leaving everything that they have known their whole life. But this is the alternative that side government wants to give them, because they are not going to think, because they are self-house things that it's not worth it to fight against your oppressive leader. They think the best option is to die. We don't think this is the case. What am I going to talk to you about in today's debate? Two issues. Number one, I'm going to talk to you about whether the lives of the Venezuelans are going to be affected. Number two, I'm going to talk to you about whether conflict is going to happen. But before that, let's just clarify something, right? Because the other side of the house wants to talk a lot about how the US does not have the power that they have today, that this is a country that will never be able to have the influence that this side of the house wants to talk about. Here's the thing. If the US wasn't so powerful, then why were they the first country that supported Guaido, which led to 50 other countries supporting Guaido? When the US will always be a superpower, regardless of who is at the head of its country, right? Just because of the presence that it has, because of how much of the economy it controls, because of how powerful the economy is. But more importantly, even if Trump is the joke of the century, he was the first president in the entire world to have secured a deal with North Korea and is actively trying to make things better. These are structural reasons that show other countries in the world that the US is actively serious about helping problems get solved, and is not like past presidents where they continuously want to engage in a military war, because the other side of the house was very convenient and helped us out a lot by telling us that the US is pulling out troops from Syria and Iraq, because the US is not ready to engage in another war. The US is rather ready to help problems on a more diplomatic level, and that is when this debate is going to happen. No, thank you. But why do we think the lives of the Venezuelans will not be affected to the rate they want to talk about? Because recognize that they talked a lot about how a war is going to happen, and these are individuals who are going to live absolutely terrible lives within those wars, right? Because I understand that war is a very terrible place, but never once they told you why there's an incentive for that war to happen. But here's what we're going to tell you, that why that war isn't going to happen. So we've already told you why the US possibly doesn't want to partake in the war. But let's just recognize the situation in Venezuela right now and what is happening. So we recognize that Maduro has put up a blockade to aid, which has left a lot of Venezuelans in a very desperate situation. But what happened in response, right? We saw Venezuelan people actively rally against Maduro, where they actively stood up and fought against Maduro and put pressure on Maduro to do something. This is what made Mike Pompeo actively take a stand 2 days ago and say that Maduro is going to step down in 2 days, because now he's losing the financial support that he needs, because all these Western powers that he wanted to talk about that have their own problems have put sanctions on Venezuela. The US has not wanted to recognize Venezuela's major oil company as a legitimate oil company. All these structural harms mean that Maduro is already losing. Because the pressure that we wanted to talk about our side of the house is happening, and this pressure is significant because this is the pressure that is going to make Maduro think twice about the things that he's going to do. He's no longer going to have the confidence to openly have this aid block because people on the ground are very, very angry. Why is this bad? With the point at which you do not have the support on your ground to this level is the point at which you will never be the president of the country, and the harms that you want to stop are going to be put. But more important, this is the added level of message that is going to happen. The more Maduro angers the West and every other country in the world, is the less likely he's going to get asylum at the point at which he is. With the point at which he continuously wants to create a war and make people's lives worse, at the point at which he doesn't have that safeguard. These are mental calculuses that Maduro will take into account when making the decision of whether or whether not to leave. But what is the alternative on their side of the house, right? The alternative is to absolutely no intervention, where Guaido, who is basically an outsider, who does not have the military and financial capacity to go against Maduro, does not have the means to do the right thing for the country. They are going to live in a world where the harms that talked about, like having an authoritarian government for the rest of their lives, are actually going to materialize because there's never going to be a back people standing up. Because you have to recognize that Maduro is already cracking down and using the military to silence people on the ground. When the point at which this silencing gets harmful is the point at which nothing will ever change. Sure.
If it is true that your context of Maduro stepping down in 2 days is correct, then why is it that there's still so many crackdowns as illustrated in your own speech?
So we think he's always going to have those crackdowns, so that's what's happening. What am I saying? We think that some crackdowns have been happening thus far because he thinks that he has control over the country, right? We're the point at which he starts to realize that he's losing control of the country when the military is now actively having smaller coups and telling the people, we are now ready to help you make things the country right. Is the point at which he's going to lose that confidence because he's losing control over the country and how that country is going to play out. We think it's very essential. We have to recognize the point that when he loses that control is when he's going to lose the military backing that he supposedly has now, which we're already seeing falling apart. In contingent upon the fact that there have been multiple cracks by the military itself supporting people on the ground throughout their riots against Maduro. Why is this important, right, ladies and gentlemen? We think it's important because it's the only way Maduro is ever going to stand up. Because your side of the house is right to say that Russia firstly support Maduro. The only thing that this side of the house can then say in response is there has to be someone of equal backing up the opposition to make sure that there's a level playing field that ensures that things can get better on a better road. We don't think that's something that happens under your side of the house. But secondly, they want to also talk about how there's going to be a hate the West narrative that's going to exist. So we don't think this is going to exist. When the point at which the Venezuelans on the ground see US actively helping them do the things that they need to do is the point at which they actually like the US. We don't think there's suddenly going to be hate crimes, and I don't know what's happening there. But thirdly, right, they want to talk about post-war reconstruction and how this is going to affect the lives of the people on the ground. So we think this is going to be great on under our side of the house. Why do we think it's better here? Because now, if we can oust Maduro and actually have Guaido become the next prime president, we think other countries in the world are more inclined to invest into that country because this is a person who is going to use that investment to the best of his capacity because he has to be transparent because he's a new leader and there's a higher chance of that country doing well economically. Why do we think these countries have an incentive to do this, right? Because this is now a new economy that can be grown to a much larger rate. This is important because we think countries like the US and countries like Europe do want to capitalize on these new economies because that's what global trade looks like right now, right? Every partners, and this is the best way to do it. But why do we think it's important that we invest? So we think when you invest in one company, it means that entire village is going to have development there. It means roads, it means new jobs for people. It means there's going to be a lesser rate of poverty within that country because people have access to better forms of health within this country. These are kinds of structural benefits that our side of the house can get that they will never get because Maduro will always be in charge and Russia and China will always have the power to exploit them and there will be no one to garner this support. Ladies and gentlemen, Venezuelans need help and it's time that they ask help from outside because they're not able to do it on themselves.
Thank you, Aubrey. Now I would like to invite Aubrey reply. Take care.
Here's how I'm going to structure my reply speech. The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to point out the huge flaws inside the government, and secondly, I'll tell you why opposition took this debate. So firstly, the flaw of government. So their alternative was very weird, because their alternative was really simple. They said China and Russia can give jobs to Venezuelan citizens, and first I'll just refute this claim because that obviously didn't happen. And secondly, they said you can flee off to Colombia. Yeah, great, you flee off to Colombia, but how long is this going to be a continuous cycle of individuals fleeing out without having a sense of identity, without having any form of sense of belonging and the feeling and presence of being at home? That is the demise of your community. Because notice this, their long-term argument is that Venezuelan citizens will just live in Colombia as immigrants, living substandard lives, but not ever having to say that I am home and I am happy. So we're willing to bite the bullet and say, even if somehow you engage in intervention and wars, we think any situation is better being in Venezuela, because if you're already dying, we don't have aid, at least some possibility of getting aid, some measures taken to get that aid and to stay in your country is better, because in your world, they just lose all hope and life is meaningless. That is the huge, the long-term outcome of their debate. So the first flaw is that they argue to you that this engagement of US, Russia, China, and this huge war that will happen. Here's why it's really problematic. They just took the last resort of foreign intervention. We put to you that it's unlikely for war to happen, for US to engage in foreign intervention, because this debate is just about branding Guaido as an interim president. So you have to deal with all the benefits that we get in the formative part of the debate, which is the branding part. And we told you, when we brand Guaido as an interim president, that is when we create change, because when we branded Guaido as an interim president, that's when we got 50 states to also give help and to also recognize that Venezuelan government is under an authoritarian regime. But much more beyond that is we give moral legitimacy to Guaido and people to oust the current authoritarian regime, which is Maduro. So they never dealt with the formative benefits that you get and only assume, and the whole debate was only clashing with the last case and worst case scenario, and that is war. And we proved to you why war is unlikely to happen, because they already put to you that it's a lot of money they will be funding, a lot of collateral damage, and given the fact that US, Russia are also global superpowers and have a lot of money and also have dangerous troops, it's going to lead to a massive war and a lot of lives will be affected. So we don't think that war will necessarily happen, but even if it does, I'll tell you why that's better for the long-term sustainability of Venezuelan citizens. So then the third problem, they said, oh, moral legitimacy is false because moral legitimacy can be given to Maduro as well, because now China and Russia can also say, oh, Maduro is a true president, we give moral legitimacy to him. This is why this outcome is highly ambiguous, because your moral legitimacy is contingent upon people supporting Maduro to begin with, so they don't. So given the fact that they don't support, your moral legitimacy cannot happen. So fourth, they said that the absence of international community helping is because people ridicule Trump. Really? You think the criteria of international community determining whether or not to help is because people did not clap for Trump some meeting or something? But we think those things are false, those metrics are false. Because number one, the whole of the United States is not reflective of only Trump. And secondly, we think there are a lot of successes of the United States that potentially make the United States as a serious actor in wanting to intervene and make situations better, like the successes of like the summit that they had with North Korea and attempting to denuclearize is a great success. We think those things are stuff they never engage with. And lastly, this weird thing about anti-Western rhetoric, they said Maduro used this as a unique position to spread anti-Western sentiment. If this is true, I don't see the harm of him spreading anti-Western sentiment to his citizens, because they just hate him and they definitely support Guaido's movement. So why do we take this debate? We prove to you that we have better incentives to oust that government, to make situations better, because we will get that aid. Even if we die in the long term, at least right now there's a possibility of making situations better at home, rather than dying in Colombia, living in Colombia, where your life is not really happening.
Thank you for the speech. To wrap up the debate, I would like to invite Governor Naike.
from European nations and UK supporting Juan Guaido, all the way to 50 nations that voiced out support. I think a huge problem in opposition is the dilution of the benefits, the failure to respond towards the analysis we brought to you from the central government, and then simply trying to cop out with examples which are illegitimate. Their response, as why Russia fears US, was an example of North Korea, who just built up its nuclear arsenal maybe 1 year ago at the very best. This isn't good. This is a literal constitutional mismatch on their side of the house. There will be three main issues in this debate. The first, will US succeed? The second, who harms Venezuelans more? And the second, the branding of Guaido, and is it important? The first thing I understand is that they say in diplomatic context, you will brand Guaido as interim president and that will give you the benefits. In their best case scenario, all they give is aid. We told you that your aid is being blocked out actively by Maduro, aid isn't reaching individuals on the ground, and the worst part is, people who consented to leaving the country, who willingly packed everything up to try to search for a better life in Colombia, are actively being blocked out by your people simply because Maduro has extra pressure on their side of the house. So if that's the soft case they want to run with, it becomes a comparative weighing out the benefits and the harms, right? The benefit they get from just simply recognizing Maduro is that maybe it's an aid, but does it reach Venezuelans? No. The harm is you create external pressure that has no basis, that doesn't do anything, and that pressure directly affects the individuals on the ground who are innocent, who could have very well wanted to leave Venezuela to find a better life for their family. That is unjustified. That's a moral abhorrence on their side of the house. The second, will there be a proxy war in these circumstances? I think we have to realize that the characterizations they had as to why a proxy war won't happen because Russia and China don't want to challenge the US is really false. We have examples of Russia intervening in Syria through a proxy war with the US in circumstances where Russia has maybe equal military might. The only message they gave us was North Korea. It was a wrong context. We don't see where the Nazis falls in on their side of the house. And we even engaged in case in which there could be a proxy war, and maybe they succeed. And they ditched the entire argument, even conceded that the US won't stay for post-war reconstruction. That means they also never dealt with all our harms on how you leave the country in a worse off circumstance, with Juan Guaido getting less political structural support in a worse off economy in their world, and hence people on the ground suffering even more in this circumstance. The third, who harms Venezuelans more? I think it's important for us to recognize that both sides already accepted Venezuelans live a very bad life in status quo. But the comparative is, our burden was to prove that you're backing led to worse circumstances, at least we don't make it as bad for people on the ground. In this, we've proved so many levels as to why Venezuelans live better lives if you don't back Juan Guaido up. And the only argument they had to support this was that when you back Juan Guaido up, people will feel flared up. They will support Juan Guaido, they will go on rallies. Number one, we told this already happened before US supported Juan Guaido. Juan Guaido already had rallies, already was an opposition member, already was in some cabinet, something in like some national level cabinet. We think those circumstances prove that even without US support, people already supported Juan Guaido. But the issue is cracking down upon these individuals. That just amplified it in your world, and you didn't tell us why. You take away that pressure on your side of the house. The failure of opposition to deal with the two major arguments today was the first, who harms Venezuelans more? We think we take the debate on a clear scale. The second, in their soft case, which led to zero benefits if they wanted to run on the whole, I'll just recognize him as interim president, leads to no benefits whatsoever. And in their world, I didn't realize the amount of flip-flops they had, the amount of arguments they ditched right from first. From first, they ditched their European context, they ditched all their international dimension, they ditched the entire argument on how US is the international arbiter. We think those are the reasons why some opposition already recognized it, already lost this debate due to lack of nuance and a lack of solid responses. Panel, you support a world in which Venezuelans at the very least have an alternative to leave a desperately harmful circumstance, to find a better life for themselves in another nation by crossing that border, which they perfectly consented to. We think should allow them to do so. Don't allow unjustified forms of blockage, which only leads to worse off suffering for individuals on the ground. All you do is let Maduro crack down more. All you do is have Maduro's military shoot down individuals who try to grab for their aid at that border blocked by lorries.